In the last tutorial, I just didn't finish quite in time in order to replace the basketball. So a simple way to do this is to find your object in your library, or you can double click on it on your canvas, and we're going to go inside of this and replace it. Now if you double click on the library item, just be aware that it does appear to be in its own window instead of on the timeline. So it's just something to be aware of. You can do either place. Now I'm going to replace this circle with a ball, a basketball. So the first thing you have to do is find a basketball somewhere online. I found one that's a PNG, so I'm going to go ahead and save this image. And then I'm going to open up this image. The reason why is because it's pretty large in scale, and I know that I want it to be smaller than this. So I'm going to make it maybe 150 pixels. Oops. Computer was just acting up there. Just a little bit smaller because I know that it doesn't want to be highly detailed in Flash. Now I can save this, and I'm ready to drag this into Flash. In order to drag it into Flash, go ahead and just drag it straight in from wherever you got it. And I do want to replace it because I already had a copy of it there. And it's pretty low resolution, but when it's actually full screen, you won't really be able to tell. So I'm just going to get it nudged into place here. Nudging seems to be going a little slow during this recording. There we go. Oh. There we go. Now I've got it precisely placed. I can go back to the main layer, and now you see that I have a basketball for that animation. That works great. Whoops. That looks much better, which is great. Now, let's save your work, and we want to look at some stuff about the code. Right now, everything should be working just fine, meaning that you're able to play your movie, it'll play the animation, and then you can replay the movie. Now, one thing that I did notice, which was funny, I didn't even notice it when I first went to it, is that it even has a warning that tells me that the frame numbers in easel.js start at 0 instead of 1. That's why we had to go back to our code at frame 1, or actually, I'm sorry, at frame 75, and tell it to go to and play 0 instead of 1. That's exactly it. In fact, it even tells you up here, which is very important. So, next thing that I want to do is I'm going to go back to frame 1 because we are going to change some of our code to find out what happens when we do have it wrong. First off, I'm going to change it from this play button to this play button 2. That means that it's not going to know what object it is that I'm trying to add this event listener to. And the reason why is because the name that I'm referring to add the event listener to has to point to an object, and if the object that I've got up here is a different name, then it's going to have a hard time finding that particular object. So I've intentionally done that wrong. I'll save and do Control Enter. Now you'll notice that my window doesn't render properly. It doesn't animate, it doesn't show me that play button. And the reason why is because we've got an error. The only way to know that you have an error is to inspect our code. So when you're using Chrome, you can right-click and choose Inspect. Now I'll go to Console, and this shows me the JavaScript error that I have here. Cannot read property add event listener of undefined. And so what's happening is it's saying that the object that this event listener is added to is currently undefined. So we come back and we make sure that we're using the correct object name instead. Now I'm also going to change the E in my event listener to a lowercase e, and let's do Control Enter again to test our movie. Now it's not rendering again, and this time when we inspect our code and go to Console, now it will say this play underscore button add event listener is not a function. So the problem is add event listener is not a function that Flash recognizes. So you might ask, well, how did it recognize the other function here? The way it recognizes this function is that we're creating a function by putting the name function before. So this is creating a function called playMovie, so we can name that whatever we want. Since here we're using a built-in function, we have to make sure that we have the uppercase and lowercase in its proper location. Otherwise, it will not work. Now, it'd be really nice if this would color code and turn blue or something like that, but that only happens when you're using ActionScript 3. Do you get that color coding? The next thing that we have here is click. Maybe I can change this to clicked instead. I'll save it real quick and test with Control-Enter. And let's see, not getting anything to work, so let's inspect and see if our console notices anything. Now, because it's passing a string for clicked, it does not work. Now, there are other ones that we might be able to use. I'm not getting any kind of error. So because this is a string, it doesn't have any way of error checking that. Now, there could be something like mouse over that it could check for instead. And you'll see that indeed did work. But there's no way to easily test to find out whether or not you've done that correctly. So that's just something you have to recognize certain words that you're allowed to use. The next one is playMovie. This is our function that we have defined down here. If we name this incorrectly and then test our movie, then go to your inspect, you'll see playMovie is not defined. And so what this is saying is it does not understand what that function is referring to, or what that reference is referring to. In this case, it's a function name that doesn't match between our event listener and our other function. Now, if I changed it the other way, so this one leads to one and that one leads to another name, then we would have the same problem. We always have to make sure that the function and the event listener function that we are pointing to are the exact same name. Now, the other thing is binding. If we have this taken off right here, like where it says bind, let's test. Right click, choose inspect, go to the console, and you'll see it doesn't understand that that is a function. So what we could do here is we could actually possibly put this dot play right inside here and run that as a function. Oh, no, it'll crud out on me. So actually I think it's running that thing immediately, so that's not really good at all. So I was hoping that that could work, that you could put functions inside your event listeners, but it doesn't seem that way. So I'm going to back up until I say, oh, it's probably because we have to do the binding. So we are now binding that function, and then we're able to run it. Let's make sure that we've made our code go back to normal, and we should be able to play our movie and then replay it. So hopefully that helps understanding some basics about using code, JavaScript code, inside AnimateCC, and also troubleshooting just a couple common things that you might do. Now, if you use the code snippets, it's of course easiest to write your code using these code snippets, but that is not at all the things that you can do with JavaScript code in Flash, and I hope that we explore some of those more in later tutorials. Thanks.